Do you live in the US and want fast, fresh and tasty meals without the hassle of shopping or all that hard work preparation? Well, don't you worry, as a lazy man, I've got you covered. Try America's #1 meal kit service, HelloFresh, and get yourself fresh, pre-portioned ingredients delivered direct to your door. So why not eat well, stay healthy, and avoid the cost of regular takeout by trying HelloFresh? Just click the link in the description below for a special limited time discount and free shipping as well. Enjoy. Hello and welcome along to Matchday 34 Championship predictions from the Honest Football Podcast. We're back today with a full weekend fixture list to sink our teeth into. But before we go and do all of that, we have got 2 match days and 17 fixtures to catch up on. So let's go and do a quick recap of first what happened last weekend. It's a bit of an unusual one this, because I very rarely win between everyone out of the comments and myself. But I have won both the weekend and the midweek edition. You can see a sea of gold and green for the weekend, 2 perfect scores which were 1-0 wins at home for Cardiff and Blackpool, but otherwise lots of perfect outcomes, 11 points overall. The closest in the comments this weekend was W&G Fan with 7. In midweek I picked up 5 points as well. You can see on the screen my perfect score at last was a Championship's favourite scoreline, and it was Millwall 1 at Burnley 1, as the hosts got themselves a late point there. Burnley still very happy with that. But let's move on to the weekend predictions, because there are 12 big games in a championship. And we start on Saturday lunchtime with one that's pretty tricky to predict. Coventry City host Sunderland, and Coventry, like Sunderland, last played Rotherham in the league. That was last weekend. It was a 2-0 victory away from home. A very solid performance. Another late goal, which they're always very famous for and have been for the last couple of years. And it was just a polished display. Rotherham only had 1 shot on target. Coventry were ruthless, which they're not always, to be fair, but a good win for them to improve their away form, which is something they've needed to do. They're at home in this game though, and they are a very strong side at the CBS. They've only lost 4 home games all season, but they come up against the Sunderland side who, despite their blip in the road in midweek, are a very good team away from home. They lost 2-1 to the same opposition, Rotherham. And it looks on paper like Rotherham went 2-0 up, Sunderland got a consolation, whatever. If you watch back the highlights for the game, some of the chances Sunderland had were amazing. How on earth they didn't get something out the game, I don't know. Opta-Stats had it at 4 clear-cut chances. Joe Gelhardt got himself a goal, which is a positive from the night. But Sunderland, for the most part, probably had the better chances in the game. And unfortunately, they just weren't clinical enough. That's what happens when Ellis Sims is recalled, when Ross Stewart's injured again. That's the bit that was missing for them. But otherwise, still a decent display, albeit maybe some concerns defensively in that one. But overall, you've got to say Sunderland are a great side away from home. Coventry are a brilliant side at home. I mean, part of me wants to go for a 1-0 home win because I feel there's a chance, but I don't see Sunderland not taking chances 2 games in a row. So as a result, I'm going to start with the Championship's favourite scoreline. It got me a perfect score in midweek. I'm going to go Coventry 1, Sunderland 1. Let's move on to the 3 o'clock kickoffs, and we start with my team Luton Town. They go away to Birmingham City, traditionally a bit of a bogey side for the club. For Luton last week, it was a 1-0 defeat at home to Burnley. A very frustrating game, very stop-start, but very even. It was unfortunate. I felt the officiating could have let the game flow a little more, but Luton were competitive. It was 2 very good sides, and in the end, it was settled by a penalty. But the crucial thing is that after that, Tom Lockyer, the captain and star centre-half, sent off for dissent, and that unfortunately is going to be a problem for Luton. They've been short of defenders due to injury all year. There's still 2 centre-halves out at the moment, and I'm not sure how they're going to be able to rejig that. And it's not the ideal game for it when there is that little bit of a mental block, which is pretty publicly talked about by the fans against Birmingham. There's been some awful performances against them. And when you add to that Birmingham are now under big pressure, 3 defeats in a row. 3 defeats in a row, 2 of them against Cardiff and Huddersfield down at the bottom. And those sides are closing the gap. Birmingham are 7 clear of the relegation zone. 2 of those teams in the bottom 3 have got a game in hand. And Birmingham, despite maybe running it close against Norwich late on, they were firmly outplayed for the most part of that game. It looked like it was going to be a comfortable win for the hosts. Birmingham did fight themselves back into it, but they didn't deserve to get anything from it. They were a victim of a wonderful Marcelino Nunez goal, but we can deal with that later in the Norwich section. For Birmingham, they've got to find form. At home, they are a little bit of a mixed bag. Luton are one of the best away teams in the division, but it's 4 in all competitions without a win for them, albeit 2-1 all draws away from home prior to the Burnley defeat. I'm not sure what to go for here. There's part of me that wants to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline again, but I know that the Birmingham curse is going to strike, so there's no point arguing with it. I'm going to go for 2-0 to Birmingham City. If it's any other game, I'd back Luton in this one. But I've got to go for Birmingham because it's just created that fear in Luton fans' minds. Next up is Bristol City versus Hull. Back-to-back 1-1 draws for the host. They drew with Sunderland last weekend, whereas Hull were helped to a 0-0 draw at home to Preston. But we've seen away from home recently under Liam Rosenior. They have been a little bit more solid. Of course, they had the defeat at Norwich, but David Wagner's had a bit of a bounce there. For Hull, though, I've mentioned many times, 4 clean sheets in 5. Massive fan of the work Rosenior's doing there, and I just hope he gets to do sensible work in the summer, rather than the owner getting a bit overexcited. Bristol City themselves on a long unbeaten run in pretty good form. They've started to look good again, but we did see some frailties against Sunderland. They were aided by a 93rd minute penalty in a game where they were just shaded, to be fair, but that's no shame against Sunderland this year. Bristol City have pushed themselves up into that middle pack. Of course, their early part of the season, a bit like Hull, was hallmarked by conceding lots of goals. Both sides have been better defensively recently, which means we're probably going to get a stupid 3-2 or something, but I'm going to go the other way. I'm tempted to go for a 1-0 to one of the sides, but I'm not going to. I'm going back-to-back 0-0s for Hull City. It's generally the base they play from away from home. I'm going Bristol City 0, Hull City 0. Well, who would have had this next one as a home banker 2 weeks ago? It's Burnley versus Huddersfield. First v 22nd, but Huddersfield have got the mighty Neil Warnock in charge, and my word, did he have an impact. It's a little bit false to look at the stats for Huddersfield v Birmingham, because you could argue Birmingham had slightly more shots, slightly more of the ball, etc. But Huddersfield hit the woodwork a couple of times. It was an end-to-end game. It was brilliant stuff. But Huddersfield put faith in young players. Neil Warnock gave confidence. The crowd was bouncing as we expected last weekend. And albeit they conceded that early goal, they responded brilliantly and scored 2 very good ones of their own. So Neil Warnock giving them a chance down at the bottom there. But this one's going to be very tricky. I think he joked he wanted a holiday again this weekend, didn't he? Because Burnley, despite that late equaliser from Millwall last week, is a brilliant run they're on. They're still unbeaten. They won 1-0 at Luton last weekend. They were professional. They were efficient. And even if it had been a 0-0, it would have been a decent game for them. But they didn't look like conceding. They were a really solid side. It's been the hallmark of their year. The only side to concede less than 30 goals in the Championship. And Huddersfield are going to have their work cut out. I know that Neil Warnock will have an impact. I know he'll set up solid. But there's only so much you can do with Huddersfield here. I think Burnley will run away with it. It's just how many they get. I don't think it's going to go mad. I think it'll be comfortable. Burnley 2, Huddersfield 0. Next up is another one you might have had as a home banker, which is Norwich City versus Cardiff City. Cardiff very much at risk of the drop zone now. Just 4 points clear and 2 of those below have a game in hand. But they have made it back-to-back wins in the Championship at a crucial time. Sabri Lamucci finding the clean sheets against Birmingham and then Reading last weekend. A 1-0 win on Friday night getting me a perfect score. But the crucial thing for them is whether they can score enough goals. Romain Sawyer's popped up with a very late one against Reading. They popped up with 2 very late ones against Birmingham. Is it going to be part of his drill to make them fitter, to make them stronger than other teams later in games? Because they're still not looking a huge threat from open play. Maybe they are going to have to rely on that late on. David Wagner's side, on the other hand, 3 unbeaten now. A 3-1 win at home to Birmingham. We mentioned that goal from Nunez. It's a goal of the season contender. A sweet strike on the volley from miles out. It's a beautiful technique. But still, it's a decent run of form for Norwich. They're back in the mix of the playoffs, 1 point off now. And after those 2 defeats against Burnley and Bristol City, was important for them to get back to winning ways. So I'm a little bit torn on this one because I feel Cardiff can be a threat. They're going to try and keep it tight. We could well see a repeat of the Wigan-Norwich game, a 0-0 there. But I'm going to go at Carrow Road. They've got the fans back on side a bit now. I'm going to go for Norwich to nick it. I don't think this is going to be pretty. I'm going for the host by 1-0. Can I get the odds on a 0-0, please, for this next one? Because it is Preston North End versus Wigan Athletic. Sean Maloney's side, 3 clean sheets in 4 with that 0-0 against Norwich. A brilliant effort to turn their fortunes defensively Under Kolo Touré in particular, and the latter stages under Richardson, they were shipping goals galore. Here, they've been rock solid. They've lost a bit of that attacking threat, but in games like this, it's about picking up points at the moment, staying in the mix. Preston, on the other hand, very poor at home. We've mentioned it all year. Nicked a point against Luton the midweek before last, but again against Hull away from home. No real attacking threat, just happy to stay in the game. It's a really interesting season for Preston because there's times where they've just looked brilliant, but to go away to Hull, not have a shot on target, probably not something to be particularly proud of. Preston have the second worst home record in the league. Wigan away from home, they are better, but that's not saying a huge amount because at home they've been awful. I have to go for 0-0. I think this is the game to avoid this weekend. You may well end up getting a thriller if someone scores early, but I'd imagine 0-0 is probably the favourite in terms of result here. Time for another new manager bounce perhaps, because next up is QPR versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn back-to-back 1-0 wins, and if you look at their last 6 games, 3 1-0 wins, a 0-0 and 2 1-alls. It is perfect championship form for this stage of the season. They've got themselves back up to 4th. You've got to give John Dale Thomason credit at the moment. Not the most exciting game to watch against Blackpool, but they did enough. They didn't have a shot on target against them. They created the only couple of great chances in the game, and they controlled the ball for the most part. A really good performance. For QPR, another defeat. This one less surprising, away at Middlesbrough, of course. But you've got to say, Neil Critchley's spell was a disaster. I don't think many of us expected it. Did a very good job at Blackpool, is a well-renowned coach. It just didn't work out. And if you consider the end of Mick Beale's spell as well, where there was a big downturn in form, I think it's 1 win in 18 now in all competitions for QPR. It's a mad run of form. And against the Blackburn side, that are going to also hold a special place in Gareth Ainsworth's heart, the new QPR manager. Probably the perfect game for him to start off here. Blackburn have been a lot poorer away from home. They've lost 9 of their 17 games on the road. They're letting 24 goals. They are vulnerable. They've had a couple of 1-1 draws at good sides like West Brom and Watford. I would be tempted to go for that again because they have started drawing games suddenly. But QPR with Gareth Ainsworth, I'm expecting him to channel the inner Wickham form there. Get 1-0 up if they can get an early goal and just sit on it. Make sure they get the 3 points. It's Master Gareth Ainsworth work. And let's be fair, QPR have got to do that. They're only 8 points clear of the relegation zone. They've got the worst goal difference outside of the bottom 3. They have got to change the tide quickly. They've let in 8 goals in their last 3 games. They've let in 3 goals in 3 of their last 5 fixtures. They've got to address it defensively. And Gareth Ainsworth, a man who's loved at the club, a man who had a great playing career there, he will be the one to turn it around. I've no doubt in that. So we're going to go for QPR to win it by 1-0. A lot of home 1-0s this weekend. I'm not sure how many will come off. I've just got a feeling it's going to be a really tight and cagey week. Let's see if Gareth Ainsworth gets his 3 points. Into the home stretch now, and this one is going to be tricky to predict. It is Reading versus Blackpool, a big game for the visitors at the bottom. They need to stay in touching distance, and that's going to be tricky because despite the fact Reading have started to fall this season, they have still got a top 6 record at home. They've won 9 of their 15 games. They look really good at home, and they've always been really solid defensively too there. They won 2-1 at home to Rotherham last time out before that late defeat away at Cardiff. Blackpool, on the other hand, another defeat away from home, this time at Blackburn, albeit they did get that crucial win against Stoke last weekend. Blackpool have got the 4th worst away record in the league. Reading have got a top 6 home record. I mean, I've got to go for Reading, and I do want to go for 1-0 again, but I'm not going to. I'm going to add a couple more goals in. I think it will get a bit twitchy. I think Blackpool will have to come out if they go behind. So I'm going to go for Reading 2, Blackpool 1. Next up, a big game in the promotion and playoff race. It is Sheffield United versus Watford at Bramall Lane. We've got the situation where both sides were involved in 3-2s at the weekend, albeit they came out on the opposite end of them. Watford won a thriller on Monday night against West Brom. Really good game of football, actually. I don't think many of us expected that from those two sides. I think we thought it was going to be like the first half, a little cagey, but in the end, it just went end to end. It was brilliant. Sheffield United Millwall was another very good game. Tom Bradshaw's hat-trick putting United to the sword, and it is back-to-back defeats now for the Blades. Millwall and Middlesbrough, not the easiest opposition in fairness, so you can forgive it. But this is another tough game against a side finding form. Watford have won 4 unbeaten, albeit 3 of those are draws. And while they are conceding goals still, they are scoring for fun, which they haven't done for a long time. Sheffield United letting 3 in both of their last 2. There is a little bit of pressure now with Middlesbrough closing the gap to 4. But I'm not going to buy into this bottle job stuff you see a lot of the pundits going on about and Borough guaranteed to catch them. Sheffield United are simply going through a very tricky run of form. They've played Borough, the form team in the division, they've gone away to the Den, and now they're hosting Watford. They're three very tricky games, and after that, they'll probably bounce back again. For Watford, it's important they try and get back in that playoffs. They're only outside on goal difference now, level on points with rivals Luton and of course Millwall too. I think this is going to be a really tense game. I'm not quite sure what to go for here. My heart is probably saying Sheffield United because I predicted them to win the league pre-season, but I'm going to go for a draw. I think it's going to be maybe a little lower scoring than their weekend endeavours. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. 3 to go, and it's another big one in that race for the top 6. Not for Stoke City, but for Millwall, who are visiting them. Stoke, though, did move away from any threat of relegation trouble with a big 3-1 comeback win against Swansea. You feared the worst when they went behind early on, but that is 2 performances out of 3 that have been pretty good, and they've beaten some of those sides in and around them, which is important. A really good comeback for them. The less said about Swansea's defending, the better, but Stoke did their job. You can only take advantage of it. Whereas Millwall put in a really solid display against Burnley after a brilliant win at the weekend against Sheffield United. And we all know how good they are at home, but on the road, it's a little bit trickier to predict. Stoke, a little bit of a mixed bag at home again. Brilliant against Huddersfield, but they've struggled at times to break down some of the better teams in the division. And Millwall away, they don't often draw. They show the odd glimpse, but sometimes they're poor. I'm trying to work into it looking at it. They won away at Cardiff, they won away at QPR. 2 sides you'd argue in a similar state to Stoke, but then they lost at Coventry, who are probably in a slightly better nick. I'm going to go for Millwall to nick it. I've got nothing to base it on, other than Tom Bradshaw being in the form of his life, and Stoke, drawing blanks in 3 of the last 5 games. I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for the visitors. I'm not going for many goals this weekend, am I? Let's see if the last 2 change that. The first of them is potentially a thriller. It is West Bromwich Albion versus Middlesbrough. The defensive solidity that started under Corberan has definitely gone from West Brom now. Not in the best of form, only 1 win in their last 6 matches in all competitions, albeit they have played the likes of Burnley and Watford away from home, Blackburn at home a tricky game as well. But you would have expected more given the way they started. For Middlesbrough on the other hand, they have continued as they started under Michael Carrick. 5 wins in a row now, they've scored 3 in all of their last 4 fixtures, and they don't let in more than 1 a game. I mean, they've got the perfect storm brewing there. The momentum will go at some point. Is the pressure on now? Because a lot of people are saying they're favourites for second. They beat Sheffield United to close the gap. They got Critchley sacked following it up against QPR. Will the momentum take them all the way? Or will they start to falter as the finish line comes close? West Brom, 5 points off the playoffs now. They need to get an upturn in form. This is a tricky one. Borough don't really draw away from home. Only 1 in 17 all season. West Brom at home, they win more than they lose. Are they going to turn up for the books here? This is one of those games where on paper you look and think, if Borough are going to lose a game, it's this one. We saw it away at Sunderland, but then I predicted West Brom to do that to Burnley and they let in a late free kick. I'm going to go for West Brom. Surprise at the weekend. Borough are going to be brought back down to earth. The finish line's getting closer. They're in the form of their life. I think this is going to be a blip in the road. Both managers doing a good job so far, but West Brom to nick it by 2-1. And the final game on Monday night is Swansea City versus Rotherham. I mean, a good thing for Sky at the minute is Swansea basically guarantees you goals against because they're conceding them for fun. That's 12 goals in their last 5 games now. Only 1 win against Blackpool in their last 6. But this is a similar type of home game against a side near the bottom. And you would have said the same against Stoke when they went 1-0 up, but they have got to take advantage here. Rotherham, they got a good win against Sunderland in midweek. I have no idea how they won it because Sunderland had all the clear-cut chances. But they got the win, they got the 3 points, and we've said it a few times for Rotherham this season. They've got a handy knack of staying in games. I think here, we all know what's going to happen. Swansea will have 70-75% of the ball. Rotherham will sit deep in a shape. They'll try not to be broken down. And the question is, will Swansea give away a stupid chance on the counter? Will they give away a set piece and concede because they're so vulnerable from them? And will they be able to get through Rotherham's defence? I'm looking at Rotherham as a side that have drawn more games than any this season. And albeit Swansea, when they do find form, are great. Russell Martin looks dejected. They look all over the place at the minute. I'm going to go for Rotherham to nick it. I don't think this is going to be a particularly exciting game. but I do think there'll be a few goals. I'm going for Swansea City 1, Rotherham United 2, and that will push the Millers away from the relegation zone. So let's have a quick recap of what I've predicted for matchday 34. A lot of low-scoring games near the start, a couple of Championship's favourite scorelines in there. Unfortunately, the Neil Warnock bounce will end up Burnley the leaders, but I've also gone for my two biggest shocks at the end. West Brom to stop the Middlesbrough Michael Carrick train, and Swansea to be defeated at home to Rotherham. A few other thrillers in there, few important 1-0 wins, but they're just my thoughts. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comment section down there and give me your predictions for matchday 34. Of course, if you beat my score overall, you will get a quick mention in the recap next time out. But let's hope it's a more exciting weekend of Championship football than I've predicted for the most part. If you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe for regular content from the Honest Football Podcast. If you haven't already, do check out our Gareth Ainsworth manager special yesterday from QPR. And of course, we'll be back on Sunday with a mini predictions for next midweek. 2 rearranged games, including Luton Town at home. So I'll have my say on those on Sunday afternoon. But thank you as always for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll see you again next time for more Championship predictions.